Thatcher's era maybe bring truth.
Margaret Thatcher came to power in 1979 with soothing words, but during the following 11 years, sweeping changes would come to Britain. The country, she said, was weighed down by inefficient industry and an all-too-powerful state. Historian Rodney Barker says the Conservative Party leader redefined conservatism in British politics.
If by conservative you mean somebody who believes in protecting the way things are, protecting established ways of doing things, protecting established values, established customs, then Margaret Thatcher was not a conservative. She was a radical. What she wanted was very different from what existed.
What she wanted was a complete shift in the British economy. Her policies won her both ardent admirers and fierce critics as she aimed to roll back the frontiers of the state, pursuing privatization and deregulation. She cut back taxes on the wealthy and famously attacked and defeated the powerful trade unions. Eliza Philby of King's College London says those policies made Mrs. Thatcher an enemy of the left.
Her social policies and cuts in the welfare state, whether it be in the NHS, whether it be the rise of unemployment or withdrawing support and local government from communities, was all seen incredibly divisive. And she personally was demonised, particularly by the left.
Mrs. Thatcher's domestic policies were divisive and ultimately helped lead to her downfall. But her greatest political coup came from overseas. In 1982, Argentina invaded a British colony, the Falkland Islands. In response, Mrs. Thatcher sent a naval task force, defeating Argentina and regaining control of the islands. The show of military strength boosted public patriotism in Britain and, says Philby, helped rejuvenate the nation.
In 1979, when Mrs. Thatcher came to power, there's a real sense of prevailing national decline. And really it's the Falklands War which is the turning point, and a renewed sense of Britain's national revival. And Mrs. Thatcher says in 1982, famously, after the Falklands victory, Britain has ceased to be a nation in retreat.
Mrs. Thatcher further raised Britain's profile through her alliance with former US President Ronald Reagan. The two leaders shared views on many issues. Both were strongly anti-communist and favoured free markets. That bond was a key part of the Western unity that helped end the Cold War when Mikhail Gorbachev was head of the Soviet Union.
Personally, they were complete opposites, very different personalities. But when it came to their opposition on communism, they were completely on the same page. It really was enacting as matchmaker between Gorbachev and President Reagan, where Mrs. Thatcher's role in the Cold War, or indeed ending the Cold War, really came into its own.
But Mrs. Thatcher's legacy stems as much from her personal character as from her controversial policies. Famously dubbed the Iron Lady, she was fierce and uncompromising, with a distinct style and way of speaking. Moreover, she was a woman.
Not only was she the first woman Prime Minister that the United Kingdom has ever had, she's the only one we've had since as well. A woman had to be at least 200% cleverer and more hard-working and more conscientious than a man. She had to fight her way through that, and it was important.
After 11 years in power, Mrs. Thatcher was ousted by members of her own party in 1990. But she had already permanently altered the political and economic landscape of Britain. Selah Hennessy for VOA News, London.
That the news from United Nations and